Learn the most advanced recruiting techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with Rick Girard.
And we are live. All right, remember that person you really wanted to hire, but they took a job somewhere else? Now is the time to reconnect. Through no fault of their own, great talent is being displaced due to the pandemic, and now is the time to proactively hire and raise the level of performance through opportunistic hiring. So this crisis will pass, as we all know, and when it does, emerge as a much stronger organization and be positioned to crush your competitors. I'm Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and hiring managers avoid costly hiring mistakes by identifying a specific problem and providing proven solutions to enable your company to win the right hire. We share insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, disruptors, and industry experts like our guest today, Mr. Jeff Erle. He is the former CEO of MobilityWare. Jeff has held numerous C-level positions throughout his career. His experience spans across startups and privately held and large enterprises, including ADP, Western Digital, MobilityWare, and most recently as the COO of Blast. Jeff focuses on building high-performance teams and evolving award-winning cultures focused on multi-generational workforces, developing coaching key executives, and helping companies to develop strategies to scale for growth and or exit, which is what makes Jeff the perfect expert for today's topic. Jeff, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show today.
Thanks, Rick. So happy to be here. Appreciate it.
I'm happy to have you. And thank you, by the way. I know this pandemic has been kind of challenging on all of us, but we're all under house arrest right now, as I can see you are as well. So I'm happy that you've been able to join us.
Thanks. Really appreciate your accommodating my stay-at-home needs to social distance. Thank you.
We all have them. We all have them. All right. So today we're going to focus on why right now is a great opportunity to hire. And then we're going to talk a little bit about A players. What are they? And then how to identify and evaluate your company for performance during this downturn and elevate that performance. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, it's a good one. Let's go.
So why is it important right now to be proactive and hire?
Yeah, great question. Well, obviously, we're in uncharted waters, not just with staying at home and the fear of getting sick and maybe even dying, but in the workplace as it relates to employment, the employment picture, really the unemployment picture. We came from an environment the best in history from an unemployment perspective, and now we're heading towards one of the worst.
And it was like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. To your point, it really creates a lot of opportunistic elements to what companies can do to upgrade their talent for the future. And I love that opportunistic word. That's it, to pick off some good talent today.
Gosh, it was funny that we're doing this episode because I saw a tweet this morning from Mark Benioff. And Mark Benioff actually said that they had 2,200 jobs that are open, and they're prioritizing these jobs for referrals through friends and family of employees who are specifically have been displaced due to the virus. If that's not evidence that we should all be doing that, I don't know what is.
Yeah, so obviously if your pockets are deep enough, like Salesforce, that you can afford to hire a couple of thousand people, even in today's environment, then yeah, go for it. But I think even smaller companies have the opportunity to pick off some talent. It's no secret that other than maybe your IP, talent is your tightest and most important asset. And right now, if you're trying to get investments and raise a round of funding, it's clear that many investors, I've been a Tech Coast Angels investor and member for over 10 years. And we always talk about it's not just the horse, but it's also the jockey, right? So the CEO, but the CEO's team is an extension of that jockey. So it's really important to get really good people. And now they're available.
So it's really the jockeys, or actually it's the racer and the pit crew, right? Yeah, that's really what you're looking for?
Yeah, even better metaphor. Yeah, thanks, Rick.
So here's the thing. Now you have a lot of people that are worried. But if you're in a position where you've raised some funding and you can make it through this, you should continue the hiring process. You should continue to show your people that we're still growing, right? You should continue to take advantage of this and use it as an opportunity. A lot of these larger companies, a lot of them are going to use this as an opportunity for them to, I hate to say it, but shed kind of their lower performers, and they're going to upgrade with higher performers. That's just what happens in these situations.
No doubt. Great point. And one minor piece of that is there's a lot of flexibility right now. I was on another webinar yesterday about how do you find a job? It was kind of the opposite side in this troubling economy. And the notion of being flexible as a candidate to say, I can delay my start time to save you money. I can come in and work on a project basis for cheaply until you're ready to really hire me full time. You can't work really for free. Legally, it's tough, but you can do project-based stuff and keep the costs down, but get yourself ready, build relationships, learn if you're new coming in, you have lots to learn, and you can get that started sooner than later and lock that candidate in if you're the hiring company, but not have to shell out the dollars up front. So there's a lot of flexibility and capabilities that people have today, given the circumstances.
Yeah, and I think it's important, though, that candidates, even though they need to bring in a paycheck, either do the work as a contractor and get paid for it, or be selective now, because I think the opportunity goes both ways. Mm-hmm. Now you have the ability to be selective and try to really spend the time to think about what it is you want and target those companies who fulfill that for you.
A lot of people are doing soul searching of all kinds.
Yeah.
As it relates to career pathing, it's a great time to take inventory. Yeah, what you want, what you're good at, and what you want to do next. It's not always obvious, but now's a really good time to think about that.
Okay, so let's talk about the concept of an A player, because I think there's going to be A players that are out there that normally you have to do a lot of work to get. What's your definition of an A player? And let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great one. So, the concept came up with the book Top Grading 10, 20 years ago. And there are a number of elements that I really embraced then. And I think it's even more important today. And back to your point about being opportunistic, we have a chance now to go find these people, right? And we can talk about how we do that. But, an A player is not just that person who's a top 10% performer. That's kind of duh. But they really have to be willing to come to work for you, given the compensation level you're willing to offer, who their boss is, what their role and responsibilities are, what your culture is like, right? So there's this whole microcosm of things that a candidate looks at before they make a decision to come on board. And it's well beyond comp, obviously. But to get that A player, you really need to align and be candid with yourself and practical and realistic, I should say, about what are we really willing to afford? What are we willing to pay? What is our culture really? And then define your A player, as opposed to I need the best person in the industry, because you might not be able really to afford them.
A lot of times companies will chase people who are out of a name brand company or something to that effect. And I see that's where they get into trouble.
Right.
Well, if we can just get this guy out of Google, we'll be able to make it. But that's not the best person necessarily for your role. That's an ego hire.
Well said. When I was at MobilityWare, actually Google, interestingly, and Amazon both have local activities and mostly on the engineering side. And Amazon even has some game production here. And we were always looking to pick those folks off, but it was hard. They had stock options. I mean, they had these packages that we knew we couldn't compete with. So unless you really found somebody that was really searching for something different, and i.e. was willing to accept your culture, your work process, et cetera, and who they're going to work for, and they were kind of burned out on the big brand company, then you wouldn't be able to attract them. And what's harder is getting someone out of college, right? You'd think about a Gen Y or a Gen Z. They want to, tell mom and dad as they graduate that, I got this great job with Google. Not too many people say, I got this great job with, MobilityWare. Like, where? So we had that challenge and lived through that. So you really got to reset your expectations, back to your point.
Well, I think, you just brought up an interesting point. When you pull people at a large company, they have to be really burned out on the large company environment. And they have to really want to desire to have a smaller company where they can be more impactful. But if you're a startup, you should be looking for people who are builders, first and foremost. I kind of break down people into builders, improvers, and maintainers. I think people fall into those categories. Builders are the ones who are going to get your company moving forward. They're going to be passionate about it. And so just at its core level, if you look for people who have an innate desire, want to build something, that right there kind of keys you off into somebody who's probably going to do well for your organization.
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, I use the metaphor, there's pioneers, there's vacationers, and there's prisoners. right?
I like
the pioneers are the A players. They want to charge the hill. They're assertive. They're innovative. They're willing to take risks. And then you've got the maintainers, as you mentioned. I call them vacationers, right? They're just there to kind of chug along, and they're happy enough just chugging along. And then you've got the prisoners. They're the ones who feel handcuffed. They're at the water cooler complaining, but they never really leave because there's something keeping them there. So as you take inventory,
and they're holding you prisoner.
Yeah, right. You take inventory of who you've got on your team. That, again, to be opportunistic, you want to obviously identify and weed out your prisoners. Let them go. Release them. It's okay. We'll all be happy, right? Them included.
And they'll probably find a better situation. Exactly. All right, you're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. I'm Rick Girard. For our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors. Check out what we do at stridesearch.com. There you'll find additional content and resources and help to build process to land great hires. Today, our guest is Jeff Erle. He is the former CEO of MobilityWare and most recently as the COO of Blast. So we're talking about hiring A players in opportunistic hires. So where do we start? You've had experience with this. You've come out of a couple of different recessions in the past. Have you not, Jeff?
Oh, yeah.
Where should an entrepreneur take advantage of this time frame right now?
So really good question. I feel like there's three large steps. So the first one is sort of what we just talked about, which is getting aligned internally and defining, and the alignment part's almost as important as the definition, around what is an A player, what are we chasing? Do we want someone making 300 grand a year at Google, or are we okay at 150 with somebody who isn't at Google, right? The second step is to really look at your team and teams of people, or your senior team. Usually in a startup, you're thinner from a layer perspective. But who, if you were on the Titanic and you had to get off, you've heard this metaphor before, and you've got one lifeboat with 10 people, who would be in the lifeboat and who's not, right? And those that you wouldn't put in the lifeboat are obviously those that you have an opportunity to maybe trade out if you can't build them up and make them better. So look at your performance management history of what people have performed and haven't. You can do some force ranking, which is the boat analogy. And then the third step really is developing, I think, a really good recruiting strategy along the strategy itself, but the methods and capabilities with which you do your recruiting in these changed times.
Can we go back just a second? If you're going through and you're evaluating what you already have, you mentioned pioneers, vacationers, and prisoners, right? Mm-hmm. So what's the line between pioneers and vacationers? How do you differentiate between those?
Well, part of it's just gut feel, and you just sort of know if you've been working with someone for a while. But if you want to make it more objective than subjective, as I said, you can go back to the performance review if you have any internal performance management methodology that you do at the end of every year, to do meriting. So pick five. If you're an entrepreneur and you have a team, pick 5 key competencies that you really believe are most important to not just to succeed, but far exceed in your company. And then take those 5 and map each of your people very quickly on a scale of, call it 1 to 4, 4 being they're amazing, 1 meaning they stink, and just grade everybody. You can kind of come up with a score against these 5 or 7 core competencies, and it'll start to unfold for you if it's, you want to go beyond just gut feel about who's a pioneer and who's a vacationer. Because if they're not fulfilling the key things you need and want them to do, especially the investment you're making as a startup, because every person's expensive to you, then you want to do something different with them, and it's a chance to upgrade.
The next step you said was develop a recruiting strategy. How did you approach that?
Yeah, so it's different times again, right? With a lot of people available, I think recruiting teams, whether you're an internal recruiting team or you're just the CEO doing recruiting yourself, or you hire a third party recruiting organization, which is a great way to do it.
Be picky.
Be picky, right. And the goal is not to be lazy, I think, even more so than being picky, meaning you're going to get flooded with resumes. You put a job opening out there in today's world, you're going to get tons and tons. I would say don't fall back on your laurels of just looking at those, what are called active candidates, the ones coming to you, and still spend time on the passive candidates. Still do your LinkedIn searches, again, whether it's internal recruiting team or external, and go after people maybe that you've talked to before, as you mentioned earlier, or that you've never been able to talk to, but now's a good time. Don't just sit back and wait, because you will have fewer A players, theoretically. It's just a numbers game, than if you go and look for passive candidates that aren't looking for a job. They're still working. They'll still change, in today's world. Their business model of the company they're with might be disrupted. They might be less happy. They see it as opportunity too. So I'd say the goal there is just not to be lazy.
Yeah, and it's really important that you revisit those people that you missed on. Mm-hmm. This is a great time to revisit the people who you really wanted to hire. Mm-hmm. Reach out, say hi, follow up with them, see how things are going. If you can demonstrate that you're hiring, you're growing through this, then you're going to become much more attractive, more attractive.
So one anecdotal story, when I was at MobilityWare, we had met with this one particular gentleman who was a senior level engineer. And when we talked to him, he ultimately was interested, but said no. We called him a year later and his circumstances had changed. He didn't get the promotion he was waiting for. His stock options were vested, so the money didn't matter anymore. The timing was so much better, and we were able to pick him off and bring him over. And had we not called him a year later, he might not have thought about calling us. So to your point, you've just got to be assertive and not afraid to make that call, even in today's times, and go after those people that you either met before or would hope to meet, because they might be available in today's world.
Even if 4 weeks ago that person turned down your offer, call them.
Yeah.
Call them.
Point. Depending on your industry, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, if you can do it, if it's somebody that you really wanted, man, there's no reason not to. I know we're getting a little tight on time here. So what would be 2 or 3 key takeaways that you can give the audience that can plug into their business right now?
Sure. So, I mean, one thing we didn't talk about is, and I'll do it real quick, you've got to develop some key capabilities as it relates to doing what we're doing here, which is having conversations remotely, whether it's a phone screen for an initial set of interviews or doing an interview like this. For a candidate, it might be multiple interviews like this. You've got to figure out Zoom or Skype, embrace this technology and get good at it, because it's likely that we're going to be hunkered down at least part-time for many of us for quite a number of months. And it's not intuitive. A lot of the skills you need that you would normally just do live and in person, sitting in a conference room in your office, you don't have that availability. So learn this, figure it out, get good at it, practice, the right backgrounds, whatever. There's tons out there on the internet about best practices on these video interviews, but you really have to embrace it, because you want to be that company that has done that and to look better for that candidate who's looking at other people.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm going to be putting out content on that later in the week. So we're going to talk about how to do a great video interview and phone screen, because that's really all we have to rely on right now is just going to be phone screens and video interviews.
Takeaways, I mean, I'd say summarizing, it'd be, reevaluate your talent, look top to bottom, look at upgrading potentially as necessary, embrace new and different strategies and ways of focusing on A players and how to find them. And then the last thing we just talked about is really embrace the new technology and figure out how to be really, really good at it to put your best foot forward.
And by the way, video interviews are going to be easier once people get used to them. I mean, they're going to start on time. They're going to end on time. It's going to be much easier to manage rather than walking somebody from a room to room to room. There's a lot of pluses for it.
Totally agree.
All right, Shu, we're just about out of time for today's show. Jeff, thanks so much for your time investment today, and I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, I'm sure that some of the members of our community would like to find out more about you, reach you, maybe even talk to you. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Email's easiest. It's simple. It's jeff.erle@cox.net, jeff.erle@cox.net. Happy to respond to helping anybody or answering questions in any way. And Rick, I really appreciate the invite and having me here today. Thank you so much.
And I really appreciate you taking the time, and especially during house arrest. Hopefully I didn't bust up your binge watching that you might be doing.
We're done. We're done with Tiger King. We've moved on.
Nice. I'm still stuck on Disney Plus. I don't know. I want to thank the listening audience for tuning into this week's episode of Firepower. Quick thanks to our team, our engineer, Christopher Decker, our producers, Andrea Ballin, Ariel Kramer, and Ayla Gerard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. We're listening. We welcome your feedback. After all, this show is for you. Join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, that's HIRE, Power, POWER, radio, RADIO.com, or you can drop me an email at rick@stridesearch.com. Tune in next week. Our guest is going to be Neil Sahota. Neil is an AI expert and the author of Own the AI Revolution. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon, or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to recruitment success, Rick Gerard.